you the strength you place in the fire. We ask you for patience. You pound sin to forge. You baptize with your spirit. Our tension strength grows high. We come forth with fruit from the forge.
Hey, good morning. Welcome here to the Forge. Glad you've joined us this morning. Again, with me here in the Forge, I have Scott Frisbee and I have Ray Copelin. And we may, from time to time, see Scott's cat, whose name I forgot. I'm just calling him Theo, short for theology. So anyway, glad you guys are on the show with me again. Thanks for joining me.
Sure.
Okay, another enthusiastic sure, thanks. Okay, this is shaping up well so far. Hey, this morning what we thought we would talk about is being forged in the fire. Since our program is about the forge, we want to discuss what it means to be forged by God. My daughter and I, we used to watch a show together called Forged in the Fire, and it was about metalsmiths that come, and it's a competition, and they get just raw pieces of metal, and they take the raw pieces of metal, put it in the forge, heat and cool and pound it out and make it into a knife or a sword or whatever, something like that that was strong and was able to cut and all of that kind of thing. So that's really our idea today, guys, is what does it mean to be in God's forge? You know, where God is the metalsmith and we're the really raw piece of metal. And the only way that you can forge metal into something, change its shape, is really to pound on it. Like our theme song there, you know, the picture behind us, we're in this big forge, and the metal's heated up to incredible temperatures so it can be moved into different shapes. So we really just want to discuss what it looks like, what this forging that God does in our lives. So if I might, I'm going to start off our conversation just by reading just a little verse or two from James chapter 1. James chapter 1, verse 3 says, you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. So there is James talking about trials of many kinds. I suppose I should have read verse 2, which he says, be joyful in trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. It produces maturity. So talk to me a little bit, Scott. You had some thoughts about James 1, 2 through 4, about how God really uses these trials to forge our character.
Well, yeah, it's. I look at the trials and stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of discernment you guys been thinking about that you have to choose. Is this happening in my life because God sent it, or is it just because I made a stupid decision and got myself to a place where I'm not supposed to be? But hopefully, as you get older, you make fewer and fewer of the stupid decisions. And that's the plan anyway. Yeah. But looking at the trials and stuff, I was thinking about there was a story about Mr. Rogers, and he said, people would watch all these disasters on TV, and there'd be, a building collapsed or something like that, and there's the news guys would be there just showing all this chaos. And, he said, look for the helpers. There are people, there's, people running in there to help other people. There's the EMTs, there's the fire department, those kind of things. And I got to the point where if I'm going through something where my whole life is being turned upside down and you've got all the pain and everything going on, look for God. Where is God in all this? And God, are you trying to teach me something here? I think that's one of the things is when we're going through something to look for God. How does God fit into this? And, sometimes God will say, well, I'm trying to teach you something. And, say, Lord, what are you trying to teach me? You say, well, wait till we get to the end of the lesson, then I'll let you know what you've learned. But, I see a lot of the trials and stuff as shaping us. And I think if you talk to most people, the things that they'll say, what was the turning point in your life? It's going to be some horrendous thing that happened to them. It's not going to be, I had this bright sunny day and I was laying there, in this grass, enjoying the sun. My life just changed. It's going to be that, some terrible thing, that looks terrible from the outside. It's going to be, some big, event in their life. And that will be the point where they've had to turn around and make some changes where it's been just them one-on-one with God. And I think that's where a lot of the trials are. It separates us from all the other things in life, and it gets us to focus on, hopefully just God at that point.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at trials, because trials they beat us up, and they pound on us, right? I mean, even I really want to see the end of our video on this forge and see what that big red glowing hunk of metal actually ends up being, you know? Because really we're kind of like that. We're this raw material that God has, and he uses, it seems to me anyway, the circumstances of life, the heartbreaks, just the troubles and the stress of life, and it sometimes feels like that forge we're being pounded on.
Yeah.
And like, what's the purpose for this, God? This just hurts. Ray, you had something, you were talking a little bit about the Apostle Paul.
I was reading in 2 Corinthians 11 about what all Paul went through, and I thought about Paul being like that red glowing metal in the theme to our forge, and I just thought of Paul being that, and as that compressor or whatever comes down, it's like he was put in prison. Bam! He was whipped 3 times. Bam, bam, bam. He faced death. Bam! 5 different times the Jewish leaders gave him 39 lashes. 3 times he was beaten with rods. He was stoned. 3 times he was shipwrecked. He spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. He went on dangerous rivers. He was robbed. There was dangers from believers that claimed to be believers, but they weren't. That's a pounding too. Mm-hmm. He worked hard and long. He had sleepless nights. He was thirsty. He was hungry. He shivered in the cold. Each one of those is like a bam, a hard pound on you. Right. And yet God is, he's there. He's there to give you strength to make it through all that. When we think about Paul and, all those things that he went through, look at the man that he became out of all of that. Here he is, the one who wrote a third of our New Testament. I mean, he's just a powerful saint of God. And it didn't come without a price. Mm-hmm. And, I guess we like to have an easy life, at least I do. And that's not always what's best for us. Sometimes we need to take a pounding so we can make some growth.
Well, it's like Scott made that comment that the real turning points in our life, the real shaping events in our life are generally and almost always, and maybe we can say always, Scott, I don't know, but are those hard events.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was in this kind of leadership course, and we were told to write a timeline of our lives, and we had different colored sticky notes, and pink ones were good things, blue ones were bad things, yellow ones were whatever, accomplishments, that sort of thing. And then when you look back on all those sticky notes, and I looked back on the way my character was shaped and my growth in Christ, it was really from those sticky notes that had those negative experiences, those poundings. So that's, isn't that a crazy way for God to work, though? I mean, Scott?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, going back to the forge, the fact is that you look at the big chunk of metal. It's like when I always like watching those videos, because they'll pull that big chunk of metal out of the furnace and they'll stick it on this forge, and you don't notice it because everything is glowing, but it's getting that oxidized coating on the thing. And then when that forge hits it, bam, everything, this whole oxidized layer just shatters and falls off, and there's this really bright glowing chunk of metal in there. And Dan's pointed out to me that if you look really closely at that picture, you can see some of those little shards of the oxidized layer. But and that it's like, okay, to do any major changes, you've got to have that big pile of heat, you've got to have the big pile of pressure. And saying even in Jeremiah 18, where he's talking about going down to the potter's house, when you look at pottery, it's like, it's talking about how God can shape the pots, and this didn't come out quite right, and he just reshapes it. But once it's gone into the fire, then it's solid. But it takes fire. It's not like you can just wave a couple of matches at a chunk of clay and have it turn into a pot. It's going in at that 1,000 degrees again. That hot flame is what turns it into that thing of beauty. And I think that's, God looks at us. It takes all the big stuff is doing the big shaping, but you start looking, okay, all the little fine details, God's working on those too. But those don't take quite the heat, or they don't take quite the pressure to do the fine shaping.
Right.
But getting the big stuff out of the way, I think that's where God turns up the heat and cranks up the pressure.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned from watching that TV show, Forged in the Fire, or whatever it was called, was that you can overheat things, and you cannot heat them enough. You have to have the right amount of heat. If it's overheated, you're going to beat that metal, and it can't take the stress because it's overheated. If it's underheated, you can beat it all day, but it's not going to change its shape because it's underheated. You have to have the exact amount of heat to do that. And they would take it out and they'd beat on it, and then they'd have to put it in because it was cooling off, and they'd put it in the forge again. So there's this process of heating it up, letting it cool while you're beating it, heating it up again, taking it out and beating it. I mean, relate that to, that sounds awful. Like God doesn't do that to us. I mean, relate that to God's process of shaping our lives.
Well, sometimes I know I've done it in my life where God starts doing something, and it's like he's cranking up the heat, and I say, enough, God, I'm out of this, count me out. And it's like, okay, pulled out of the fire. He's like, 5 more degrees, I would have had you, and I got to go through and get into the fire again because I didn't learn the lesson that last time. And I don't know if we've all done that. I know I have.
Right.
And I've actually gotten to the point, I always, try to learn from the mistakes of others, kind of thing. But I've learned I've had to make a lot of mistakes on my own too. And for, okay, never pray for patience. That was
Yeah.
once that I learned from somebody else. So then, I was praying one time and I said, oh, God, how come I'm not moving forward? And he says, well, you're not letting me work in you.
Yeah.
He said, you've got to let me build this in you, and you won't, pray for it. And finally get to the point where you got to say, okay, God, whatever it takes, and even if you're gonna teach me patience, go ahead, teach me patience. But yeah, we can yank ourselves out of the fire, I think, and short circuit that.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. How else does God shape us? I mean, we've been talking about those critical events in our life. The maybe heartbreaking things or losing jobs. Just circumstances of life. But are there other ways that God shapes us, other than these great big catastrophes in our life, which we surely there's different ways.
Well, we were just talking about those other ways, but I was reading 1 Corinthians 10:13, where it says, "And God is faithful; He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you're tempted, He will show you a way out so you can endure." So it's not really talking about those real, hard suffering persecution times, but we're tempted, and He's not going to tempt us more than what we can take. And I think that's how it is with when He's trying to shape us and He's pounding on us. He's not going to pound more than we can take. He's going to do just the right amount for us. So it's individual. What's given to me is different from what's given to somebody else. It's because we're at different levels, and so God gives us just the right amount for us to make growth, and He gives us that opportunity to make growth, and we decide whether we're going to benefit from that lesson that He's trying to teach us or not.
Right.
Well, I think God is there. We look at the big catastrophic events, the big life-changing things, because, those stand out in our lives, when we look back. Mm-hmm. But I think, I figure God is doing the detail stuff too. And I remember years ago going to see the King Tut exhibit, and you look at all this big stuff that the Egyptians created. You got these pyramids, you got this giant sphinx, these big honking hunks of rock that they've shaped. And you figure, okay, and even you look at hieroglyphics, and it's like everything seems so simplistic. And then in the exhibit, there was this gold dagger that everybody came back, man, that gold dagger was amazing. It was, thing is only, 6-8 inches, but the detail had this extremely fine filigree and all this incredible detail on it. And, they were able to shape the big rocks with the mallets and however, big hammers, but you're not using those when you're doing that fine detail. And, God does fine detail in our lives too. And I was trying to think, okay, how is He doing that? And, I think a lot of it is that, we got the light taps that come through all the time on the hammer. There's the big taps, but then there's the light taps too that I imagine on the Forged in Fire that sooner or later they're doing little bits of engraving and stuff on the handles, where they're not doing the big major stuff, but maybe, they got some punches or little things that they're tapping away. And I think that's what God does a lot of things on us. And, I think one of the things He uses is other people. Whether we get along with them or not, whether they polish us or whether they chip away at us. I think God uses other people in those day-to-day circumstances to build things in us. It's almost like a rock tumbler. You put the rocks in there, and the one I had, he had a bunch of plastic beads, and he had the little levels of grit. But you put the thing in for a couple of weeks, Then they switch to some lighter grit, and over time, next thing you end up with these shiny, shiny rocks. But it's, a slow process, and, who knows how many times those little beads have had contact, with the rock.
Right.
And I think, God does some shaping with us like that too, that there is stuff going on, day to day that we may not realize, but we're gradually changing. I think as our faith grows, we can look back and say, 5 years ago, I never would have been able to trust God for this, or I was having a rough time,
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of that day-to-day stuff that we hardly notice going on, I think is doing some shaping on us too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you had mentioned, and you're right, there is that point where it gets to the fine detail, and, these guys would take, like in the picture, the background picture, they take this hunk of metal, and at first they really got to beat on it because they've got to flatten it out because they're making some sort of blade or something or other. But later on, the hammer is much lighter. And they're not really whacking it, but they're still beating on it to get the shape, but they don't have to pound it as hard. So that's, I don't know, Dan, can we ever get to the end of this video to see what they make out of that thing? Because I really want to see that. Like, you could put anything up there. You could put like a car, like, oh, they made a car out of that. I don't know. But I guess, the reason I want to see what that ends up is because there's a purpose. There's a purpose for God doing this in our lives. It's not just, it's fun to beat on people. It's fun to bring natural disasters and see how people respond. But there's a purpose for all of this. And, just like metalsmiths, they have a purpose. They take this raw material and they say, this is going to be this type of knife with this type of engraving on it, and it's going to look like this because it's going to be used for this. And they don't do, every piece of raw metal has a different purpose, perhaps. They don't make the same thing over and over. And I think, you mentioned it, Scott, that God works differently in our lives. I'm being shaped into a different instrument for a different purpose than you are, than Ray is, than Dan is, than everybody else is. So speak to that a little bit, the purpose of God's forging us, I guess.
I think, one of the things to remember too is that, it's, thinking back like pottery or something like that, even the guys on the forge thing, they've gone through lots of practice, and, if I was to take up pottery or something right now, I would probably spend days just learning how to, do the pot on the wheel and bring it up and mashing it down and starting over again. And, God is not practicing. God is the expert. He knows exactly the vessel that he has got designed for each of us. He knows exactly what the final product is supposed to be like. But that's what he's shaping us for. We're not practice for God. We're not scrap metal being practiced on. We are the final product. And that God is shaping that and making it perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good comment. I like that. God is not practicing on us. Sometimes it feels like he is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We wonder, what's the purpose of this? What's going on with this?
Scott, when you were talking about rock tumblers, it reminded me of when we went to South Africa and they had rocks and minerals just all over that were so beautiful. They were just incredibly shiny and just so beautiful. And they showed us the rock tumblers that they put these in, and they were like cement mixers. They were huge, and they would just turn these rocks and minerals over for hours, like you say, days, weeks. And one thing that I learned is that you can turn them over too much and they lose their luster. And I didn't know that. I mean, I just thought, wow, I mean, you get it to that perfect spot, and then that's how it's going to stay. But no, you overdo it, and it loses. It starts to go down. You have to do it just the right amount, and God knows just the right amount to do it to make our lives the most productive that they can possibly be. And we just have to be submissive and praying that we're in the center of God's will, because as we are, then that's when we're going to shine. That's when we'll be the most attractive, that people will want to come to know Christ.
Yeah, that's a great comment. As you were talking about that, I thought of the purpose of forging, the purpose of in the fire cooling, because after they've forged, after they've heated it, they've beat it up, it's got the shape they want. They quench it. They stick it in this cool oil to quench it. And that gives it its temper. And temper's interesting to me, because when you're making something, you're forging a knife, you want it to be hard. If you're forging a sword, perhaps, you want it to be hard. You want it when it strikes whoever you want it to strike, it's not going to fall apart, it's not going to break.
Mm-hmm.
But you can heat it too much and beat it too much, just like you can with those stones. You can overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
And tempering is that process of the perfect balance of it's strong enough to do what it's going to do, but it's not going to be brittle. Many, the metalsmiths starting out, their knives break because they overheat it. And tempering makes the blade strong, but also flexible. So it's, in a sword, it's going to flex. It's not going to snap. You have that flex in it. And to me, that's interesting, that process of tempering. We have tempered windows. What they do is they take normal windows and they put it in the process of heat and cool and heat and cool. And it alters the molecules in there to temper it, so the glass is tempered. It's got a bit more strength to it. That to me is fascinating, that whole tempering. And I never really thought about that God is tempering us. He's not only just building strength in us to persevere or to be resilient, but he is working flexibility in us, so we don't snap, but there's that flexibility to flex with trouble and move with change and that sort of thing. That to me is fascinating. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that or not.
Well, this COVID gave us a little chance to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That doesn't, well, I guess in a way it's kind of, testing us in the fire.
Yeah.
But, we had to be flexible. We had to change our ways. We had to do things differently. Mm-hmm. And good can come out of it. Mm-hmm. There's good to be had from it.
Right.
We look for it. It's there. And I think that's what we have to do is as these bad things come our way, God can bring good out of it. We just have to be flexible.
Yeah. I think of Dell McKenzie did one of the godly character qualities was flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that to be fascinating with this process of tempering.
Mm-hmm.
We're to be strong, so we stand up under pressure, but don't snap because we're flexible. We can flex with change. We can flex with the situation. We're not just. It's not just about being stronger people. It's about being flexible people too.
Very true.
There's this thing too where you've got to be flexible to allow God to mold you. And, allowing God to mold us. Sometimes, if we decide we're going to be like that stiff-necked generation, it's like, or whether you're going to let God, okay, God, you want us to be different. Okay, I'll go, you've got a different plan. Okay, let's go with that. And
Yeah.
that's the big thing, being flexible and allowing God to work in our lives.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that I would hate to, try to figure out how many blessings they've missed out on because they will not allow God to work in their lives. I mean, how many blessings have I missed out on when I've resisted God? So.
Yeah. I found a definition for resilience. If we associate temper with resilience, forging with being more resilient. And the definition I found was, says resilience is the capacity of a person to maintain their core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. Let me read that again. Resilience is the capacity of a person to maintain their core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. I think that's that strength and flexibility that, when, as Ray said, COVID hits or something hits, we're strong enough and flexible enough that we can maintain our core purpose and integrity. We don't fly off the handle. We don't, we aren't moved by every wind and wave of teaching and we don't get excitable, but we're solid. We have that strength and we have that flexibility to flex with whatever comes into our life.
And it's God who brings that balance in our life, strengthening us and building in flexibility. And we're just dependent on Him to do that. He's the one who gives us strength. He's the one who provides us flexibility so we can, be balanced how He wants us to be.
Right. You Ray had another angle at which you came at forging, and you used the word discipline.
I just thought about, I was a kid growing up. My dad disciplined me, and like the Bible says, discipline isn't pleasant when it's happening, and I sure felt that. But through time, I saw. Now I know what my dad was trying to do. I know what he was working, why he was doing all this disciplining, because he could see beyond what I could see. And he knew what he wanted out of me. He knew what he wanted in the end. And he worked towards that. And as I grew older, I saw that. And then when I had my own kids, then it was time for me to do the disciplining. And it's really not that fun to give the discipline as well. It's easier to not discipline and just let the child do whatever it wants. But the thing is, that has repercussions and things you don't want to have happen. You have to have discipline, and so over time, you see the value of that discipline, And I appreciate the discipline that my dad gave me. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I appreciated it later. And I think, well, Proverbs talks about it in Proverbs 3:11 and 12. Let's see, Proverbs 3:11 and 12. It says, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as the father corrects a child in whom he delights." Notice, the Lord corrects those he loves. My dad corrected me because he loved me. I corrected my kids because I loved them and I wanted the best for them. And when I would see them heading down a path that could be bad for them, I wanted discipline. I wanted to stop that. And so I took steps to do that. And, I'm thankful that the Lord takes steps to stop us from doing things that he can see down the line. This is not going to be good for you. And I appreciate the Lord's discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a type of forging, really, isn't it? The Lord's discipline.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And another thing is we don't discipline other people's kids. We discipline our own kids. And the reason we discipline is we have high expectations for our kids. Mm-hmm. And we don't have high expectations for other people's kids. We have high expectations for our own. And when we see our kids not measuring up to those high expectations, then we step in to help them out and help them grow. And I think God has high expectations of us as his followers. Hebrews 12. Let's see. Hebrews 12, starting at verse 7. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all his children, it means that you are illegitimate and you're not really his children at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how, but God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but become strong. And so I see that we become examples for other people to follow. One of the reasons that we get disciplined, that we get pounded on, refined is so that we can help others then when they're going through it. Because it's, just like it says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. Right. And when we see a brother in Christ who's going through a tough time, we can step in there. We've been there. We can identify with the person and help them along. I think that's our job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good thoughts. We have, got to start wrapping it up a bit. We have about 5 minutes left. Any other thoughts regarding that, Scott, or not regarding that?
Well, I think, a lot of the thing, we look at God shaping us and forging us. It is that discipline. He wants us, to be disciplined people. It's that obedience and all that. Maybe a lot of the discipline is maybe some of the smaller taps we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of the discipline is the big whacks that we deserve, or the big things that make us say, "I'm never going to do that again."
Yeah.
And a lot of it, the forging, the shaping us. I mean, a lot of it, discipline is another way of calling it that. It's just that God is refining our character that way. I thinking a lot of just how, different punishments, got all the different reward punishment kind of ways of changing behavior and stuff. And, just looking at our response to what goes on. I mean, there are kids who are disciplined by their parents and totally reject it. They decide, I'm never going to do anything that guy says ever again. Mm-hmm. And, they say, oh, I'm out, I'm out of here. And they go off out in the world and they've never learned any discipline. And, we see them on the news and, they get the people that, become disciplined and they are able to become productive members of society because they have submitted to some discipline. And, I think, God shapes us a lot that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's turning us into his citizens,
Right. Yeah.
And after that discipline, there's results. There's things that change. In 1 Peter 5:10, it says, "So after you have suffered a little while, he will restore, support, and strengthen you, and he will place you on a firm foundation. Yeah. All power to him forever. Amen." Mm-hmm. There's good that comes out of it.
Yeah.
He will restore, support, strengthen. It's there for us. He's there. He's working for a purpose, and there's all a reason for everything that happens.
Right. And that's the encouraging thing, I think, about our characters being forged. And Scott, I think you said it early on, and you just said it again, Ray, that there's a purpose. There's a plan. He is the potter who's making us into a vessel, something that he knows he can use. And he has a plan for our lives, and so we go through that process of being forged or disciplined or sanctified, if you will, even, where our character is shaped because he knows the works he has for us. He knows the plan. He knows how this event that puts us under stress and suffering is going to shape this part of our character to be able to do that work that he asks us to do. And I've always been impressed by, some people, everybody goes through a different process of forging based on what God is using them for. What tool is he making and for what purpose? But no matter if the discipline or suffering or forging is hard or more difficult than others, perhaps, we can take comfort and strength in the promise that it is for a purpose. And he is going to use us as his tool in the toolbox, so to speak, to bring people to Christ. Ultimately, that's the goal, isn't it? That
It is.
we're shaped to be an instrument for Him to promote His kingdom, to bring people to Christ, to promote everlasting life.
And what's motivating God to do all that is His love for us.
Yes.
You know, the reason my dad disciplined me was because he loved me. The reason God disciplines me, the reason God allows these tough times is because He loves me. And it's all motivated by love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Last comment, Scott?
I didn't catch that last little bit there.
Oh, I say, do you have a last comment for us?
I don't know. I think I agree with Ray. It's all because of God's love, and it's that He is turning us into vessels that will show His love to the world around us.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, thank you for your instruction, your discussion, your heart, really. And folks, thank you for joining us. You're probably going through the forge. It may be a time of heating up for you. It may be a time of God shaping you. It might be a time of God gently tapping, or more than gently tapping. We all go through this process of being tempered. But know that God loves you. Don't ever question His love. Don't ever wonder, God, why is God doing this to me? You can know He's doing this to you because He loves you. You are special. You're significant. You are being shaped into an instrument like nobody else. You are unique, and you have a unique purpose that God wants for your life. So wherever you are in this process of being forged by God, as Scott said early on, don't try to get out under it. Let Him forge you. Because if we escape, we run away now, we're going to go through it again. Because He has a plan for you. He loves you. He wants you to be the person He's created you to be. Because you fit in the kingdom as a tool that He's making so that you can have maximum impact for the kingdom. So thank you for joining us. Scott, Ray, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next week, and hopefully we see all of you viewers next week as well. Let your friends know, share this with people around you, that they can come and be part of the Forge, and they can come and know God better. Thanks. May you have a blessed day.
Ask you for strength, you push in the fire. We ask you for patience, you pound the sin, you forge, you baptize with your spirit. Our tension strength goes high, we come forth with fruit from the forge.